All right, welcome again, and thank you to all of our guests for joining us today. We are very grateful to have the Maryland Department of Commerce Research Director, James Palma, with us today for an in-depth demonstration of their new tool called Zoom Prospector. So it's now my pleasure to turn it over to you, Jim.
Great, thank you. Morning, everybody. I'm going to introduce our tool. The tool we've had for a little while, but a lot of the data that's in it is new. So that's, I think, is the exciting part. I'm also going to show you a couple of other tools. And what I'll do is I'll run through some slides because using apps on the internet sometimes works great when you're sharing live, sometimes doesn't work at all. So I made some slides that explain what the tools do, and then I'll give you a quick live demonstration of each, and then we can have some questions. So first, a quick introduction of the Maryland Department of Commerce. As the state's primary economic development agency, our job is to stimulate private investment and create jobs. We work to attract new businesses and expand and retain existing businesses. And we also provide workforce training and financial assistance to many Maryland companies. We also advertise the state, within the state and outside the state. We do international investment, trade. We're also the State Board of Tourism and the State Film Board and the Maryland Arts Council. And I have a quick slide showing us Governor Moore, Lieutenant Governor Miller, underneath them, of course, Secretary Kevin Anderson of the agency and Deputy Secretary Signa Pringle. We in the Research Department report directly to them. Again, our key services are building and site location assistance, finance programs, business advocacy. We work on tech transfer, mostly from the federal government. We try to attract foreign direct investment. We give export consulting and marketing and trade show and conference partnerships. As I said, we report directly to Secretary Anderson and the Office of Policy Research and Government Affairs. We also have an Office of Business and Industry Sector Development, which includes the Office of Strategic Industries and Entrepreneurship, which tracks what we call our key industry sectors, such as aerospace, cybersecurity, et cetera. Our Office of Business Development, which Delta Reese George is one of our business representatives, who's on your board. Our Office of International Investment and Trade, and our Office of Military and Federal Affairs that works directly with federal agencies and military bases across the state. And as I said, we also have our Division of Marketing, Tourism, and the Arts, which is Marketing, Tourism, and State Arts Council. We offer tax credits, grants, loans, loan guarantees, tech transfer assistance, and training. If you're interested in our full comprehensive list of services that both we offer as an agency and the rest of the state offers, I have a link at the bottom of this slide. And you can get these slides. I'll send a copy over to the chamber and they can distribute them to everybody who is on the call. Quickly, the Research and Information Unit, for which I am the director, we collect lots of information on location factors, demographics, workforce, business resources, real estate. We collect business intelligence of major employers, economic analysis, unemployment, trends, economic trends, et cetera. We do economic impact analysis, and we research competitiveness issues, research in other states, benchmarking to other states, et cetera. I won't go into detail with these, but we have these different products, our inventory of major location factors, our key industry profiles, our brief economic fact sheets on each county, which you may have seen. We've been publishing those since, I believe, the 1970s. Our lists of major companies, our list of new and expanding businesses, and again, economic impact analyses. We just completed one for our Office of Military and Federal Affairs on the economic impact of military bases in the state of Maryland. As you can imagine, it's large. For today, we're going to discuss a few different online data resources that are available to you for free. The biggest one I'm going to concentrate on is the one that we contract for. It's called Maryland Zoom Prospector. That comes from a company called GIS Planning. And it is a buildings and sites database, and it is also a local demographic and economic data research system. It is designed to allow people looking for buildings and sites within the state to then research the areas around those buildings and sites and see if it's actually the location that they want to put their business in. But it's also useful just for the research side as well. You don't have to be looking at a building or a site to use the research. A similar system that has different data in it that I think you should know about is the Census Business Builder. On the map, commute data allows you to analyze where people live and where they work. So if you want to put your business in a certain place, you may want to understand where the workers who work in that area live and what their commutes are, and vice versa. A quick view of Claritas segmentation data for people who aren't familiar with it. What they call these lifestyle types that marketers use to segment areas into different groups of people for marketing purposes. Then a very quick look at Reference USA Gov, which is a list of available business data, and the Maryland Workforce Exchange, which is yet another free online system that can be used to research areas. I think because the internet can be flaky when you're doing these sorts of live presentations, the first thing I'll do is I'll go through a set of slides that I made that describe Maryland Zoom Prospector, and then we'll take a quick jump over into the system to show you it in action. If for some reason the system doesn't work, at least we got to go through the slides. So at the bottom of this page, you can see the direct web link. It's properties.zoomprospector.com/Maryland. When you open up the system, this is what you see. It's just the properties that are on the left are just in order of most recently updated. So Duck Creek Business Campus was just the property. Well, it does say featured. We don't normally feature properties, but there is a toggle switch within the system that allows us to decide which properties come first. I don't know why that's featured. I didn't do that. So mostly they're just new. And I'll stop here and talk about our new data system, which makes this system so much more useful. We contracted with a company called Resimplify. I think we're their second client. They use artificial intelligence tools to go to broker websites and scrape those websites of building data. They put it into our database, and then we automatically have these updated properties. I think right now this is 2,943 results. So there's 2,943 separate properties, and in this nomenclature, a property can be a part of a shared building. So for example, if you have a spec building that has multiple bays and all of the bays are for rent, each bay will be in the system individually. So before we hired Resimplify, we had about 450 properties because we had a staff member putting the data in. So this is a big jump for us. I have noticed every time I get an email from a broker that has a new property in it, I go right over to Zoom Prospector and check, and it's already there. So I'm happy so far with the system and how it's working, but it's only been a month. So one of the things that you can do if you represent a property or you know of a property that you want to be in the system, and you go into our system and you see that it is not there, is you can send me an email and we can see about getting the property put in, because we have the ability to put properties in ourselves as well. So moving on. These are the toolbars, and there's a lot of them. It's a very comprehensive system with a lot of different features to it. Starting from the top, our top toolbars, I don't know if you can see my mouse floating around here. You can choose a location. We have programmed in every single what are called census designated place and municipalities. So there's 157 municipalities in the state, but there's also, I think, 300 and some odd census designated places, which are areas like Owings Mills or Ellicott City that they're not official municipalities, but we know of them as places. And because people talk of them as such, we programmed in those boundaries. So you can do research specifically on, say, Owings Mills or Odenton or wherever you want to be. You can also do research on the entire state. You see that on the top here for properties, you can filter properties by size. You can choose whether they're for sale or for lease. There's a lot of different filters. So if you click on the All Filters button, which I'll show you in a minute, you can have a lot of different choices. There's also the ability to do mapping in this. So if you want to know what's going on around your property or around an area, and you want to just put it on a map, we have all these map layers. If you're not familiar with GIS, or geographic information systems, a layer is just what they call the data. So if you want to see a color-coded map of population by the size of the population in a census tract, that would be a layer. So we have different layers in here. Most of these layers come with the system. One layer that is called incentives is related to us. So for example, if you wanted to see if a property was in an enterprise zone, which is one of Maryland Department of Commerce's programs, the enterprise zone map layer is in the system. So you could turn on that map layer and you could see if the property was actually in the enterprise zone. Unfortunately, the way the system works, it's not a pure GIS system, and under a pure GIS system, you could say, only show me the properties that lay within the enterprise zone. This system can't do that, so you have to sort of do it manually. There's one exception to that, and I have it on a slide a little bit later under the filters, and you can't read it because it's tiny in the slide. But there is in the upper right-hand corner is a toggle switch for opportunity zone properties. And that was something we did in conjunction with Department of Housing and Community Development, so that the properties that lay within an opportunity zone could be singled out. So if you're interested in properties that are in opportunity zones, you can hit that toggle and it will show you. And finally, there are map tools. So you can see we have things, pinpoint, measure by address, and filters. And I'll show you that in a minute. But basically, if you said to yourself, I want to know what's going on within a 45-minute drive time of this property, you could choose a property such as Duck Creek Business Campus. You could choose a filter of drive time, and you could get a report of all the demographics and business data that's going on within the 45-minute drive time of that property. Or just a radius, like a 30-mile radius or a 10-mile radius. Or you could draw your own area with this little arrow, just literally draw a circle, draw a square, whatever area you're interested in. If the area that you're interested in researching is not a property, that means that you can still do the research. You can just type in an address and you can use that address as the base point. So you don't only have to research properties that are in the system, you can research any address. Or you don't even have to have an address. That's what pinpoint means. You could literally go to the map, click the pinpoint tool, click on the map, drop your marker or your pinpoint, and that can be the center point of your analysis. So this tool has a lot of ways to do research. And we could probably play with it all day, but we only have an hour, so I'll move on. This gives you a property search idea. I looked up Odenton. So under Odenton, we see we've filtered down. There were 2,900 some odd properties in the state, but in Odenton, you can't quite read it again. Sorry, it's small. There are 6 properties in our system currently for rent in Odenton. And if you were interested in looking at one of those properties, or I'm sorry, if you're interested in filtering those properties, you could look at our filters and you can see, you could actually type in a zip code, an address. You can choose if you want a building or a site. Yeah, site would mean land versus the building. If something is for sale or for lease, filter by size, filter by lease rate, filter by sales price, filter by ceiling height. There's a couple other filters down here that you could scroll down and see. You can search on keywords in the property description. We have some predetermined property types like call centers, flex space, laboratory space, warehouses. You could just search on those. And property assets, if you want water and sewer, if you want to be near public transportation, if you want, again, lab space within the property, if you want to be in an opportunity zone, you can click those choices and then you can filter down by that. I will say that some of the property type data and some of the property asset data is not always filled in for every record. So you may be artificially limiting yourself because some of the records might not have that information entered into it. But it does help you at least get a feel for what's going on in those types of property assets and property types. And again, up in the upper right-hand corner is the opportunity zone filter that only shows you properties in the opportunity zone. Here's some location data. So we've chosen 8759 Piney Orchard Parkway. If you were to scroll down, there would be a description of the building. You can see that there's some pictures, there's a floor plan, etc. There's contact information for the broker for this property, and there's contact information for somebody at Commerce if you wanted to directly talk to somebody in Commerce. And up in the top here, once you click on an individual property, you get a slightly different toolbar of tools where you can get the report, which is what we're looking at. And by the way, you can print this report. You can download a PDF of this report. You can generate a link and share this report with somebody else. So it's made to essentially create property reports for you that you can use for other purposes. You can also, as I said, do different types of research. Now, this is slightly different than what I talked about, because now that we're concentrating on one property, this is where it's going to start. So this is your pinpoint. You can, under each one of these tools, and I'll show you one in a minute, you can type in the radius that you want. It's either a radius or a drive time around the property, and start researching the occupation data, the demographics, the labor force information, consumer expenditures if you're doing retail, wages, so you could understand what people are earning in the job types that you're interested in the area, what other businesses are in the area. Talent is really the educational pipeline. So if you wanted to know what kind of universities or colleges are in the area and what kind of people are graduating, you can do that. Or you can click on and generate a straight up city or county profile with pre-populated information. So if you click on city profile for this, you would get a city profile of Odenton. So I'll move to the next slide. This is just a straight up labor force review with drive time area. So I chose, you see that we have here, this is the tool that you see when you click on labor force. It's similar to demographics, occupation data, consumer expenditures. You get this drive time tool. And for labor force, we can choose between employees and businesses. And it defaults to miles, just because miles is easier. Miles is just a circle. It's just a radius. Minutes is a calculation. So when you type in 45 minutes, the system actually goes into its road network. This is, again, GIS in action, and calculates a 45-minute drive time on the road network, including speed limits and whatnot, and how the roads interconnect with each other, to get what areas are lay within 45 minutes of this property, which is why the boundary is jagged, because, you can go over the bridge and you can get to this part of in Centerville and whatnot. So that describes this, and you can even get into Washington. One of the minor faults of this system is it doesn't really report data outside of the state of Maryland. So the drive time rolls into Washington, D.C. You're not necessarily getting the data for Washington, D.C. We only pay for Maryland data. So that's a small fault, but we think it's not a big enough fault to be concerned about for most research purposes. So this allows you to really understand, if you wanted to locate your business in a certain area, what's going on in that area, what your pull is for labor force. And I'll show you another one, this for the same labor force. This is the mapping I was talking about. Each of these little toggles right here, and it gets a little confusing because everything has a toggle. But for this particular instance, it's telling you, I want this on the map or I don't want it on the map. You can only have one toggle at a time for this sort of map. And what this is doing is I pretended that I wanted to do some sort of computer mathematical occupations requiring business that would locate in Odenton. So this is showing me the concentration of where these people live or are occupied, where they work, essentially, in the area. So you can see that there's some darker areas that show more concentration around Odenton, but there's a huge concentration of them over here. And for this purpose, again, it's always been a little confusing to me, exactly how this system works. We are seeing data outside of Maryland. So sometimes you get to see the outside of Maryland data and sometimes you don't. So you can toggle on and off any one of these. And it's similar for most of the other choices. One that is slightly different, and I'll show you under community search, is the businesses, because those are locating individual businesses. But we'll flip over to the community side. Up top, you see this property search, explore communities, compare communities, and workforce. We've chosen explore communities, and we've chosen Odenton as our location. So I can't scroll down because this is just a PowerPoint slide. But this has an entire set of infographics that describe Odenton. You can see that here's the map that is the outline of Odenton. You have similar tools down here where you can drop pinpoints and you can do filter areas and you can search by address. You can also export this map as a graphic. So if you wanted to put it into a report, you just click the export button and it would just create I think a PNG file, or you can export it as a PDF. And again, for Odenton itself, as opposed to the area around the building, but just within the boundary of Odenton, you can do occupation data, demographics, labor force, consumer expenditures, wages, businesses, and talent. Again, you can export that report as a PDF. Here's just a zoom in on the community profile. That this is not for Odenton, this is for Baltimore. It's just an example picture. You can download the images. So if you liked this image and you wanted to put this image into some sort of a report or an email, you can just click on this and download it as a PNG and then use it to insert into something else. And all the images, that anything that has these three little dots next to it, if you click on the three little dots, you'll get the choice to download. Business search is a little bit different than some of the other searches because you are looking at individual dots that represent individual businesses. The businesses that this system uses come from a product called Reference USA Gov. Reference USA Gov used to be published by Info Group, if people have heard of Info Group or Info USA. They no longer exist. They are now Data Axle, but it's the same thing. They bought it and now they just call it Data Axle Business referenceusagov.com. So what this is, and I point that out because it's important to understand that the data source is a private data source that is collected by people sending mail and making phone calls and researching the telephone book and compiling lists of businesses, as opposed to the government collecting the official statistics that are used to report the official number of businesses when you go to, say, the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the Department of Labor. So there can be differences, and there are differences. So this is more advisory, that you're getting an idea of what's going on in the area. You cannot 100% trust that this is 100% correct, but it's good enough for government work. So as you can see, just because accommodation and food services is the first industry that pops up, I click to expand it. And again, a little bit small for you, but there's 3 bars, 61 full service restaurants, 2 limited service restaurants, 2 lodging places, etc. So within these many dots, which represent all of the businesses in Odenton, and as you can see, some of them slightly around it, because it's a little bit hard to explain if you don't know how GIS works, but this way this system works and why it's not always 100% correct with your analysis is that it is taking the boundary of Odenton and overlaying it over the smallest geography that they collect data for, which is a census block group. So any census block group that lays within the boundary of Odenton, either in whole or in part, gets called Odenton in this system. And that means you will occasionally see things like businesses that aren't within this official boundary of Odenton being caught up in the analysis. And that is because the census block group that they are contained in stretches outside of Odenton. So this is not reporting official statistics. This is like a research tool for people who are citing businesses. It's got a little bit of a slop to some of how the boundaries are drawn. That's just the nature of how these systems work. So if you wanted official statistics on the number of businesses in Odenton, I would not use this system. I would use one of the other systems I'm going to show you. This is, again, but this gives you a really good idea of what your business competition is if you wanted to, say, open up a bar or a full service restaurant. So if I went to the next slide where I just zoomed in on bars, here's our 3 bars, these little dots. Here's the names of them, Buck Murphy's, Southeast Products, and Titan Cigar. Here's their estimated sales. And here's the number of employees. So the biggest one is Southeast Product Productions. I'm sorry, it's 7 employees with $468,000 a year in yearly sales. So again, if you wanted to open a bar, perhaps you would look at Odenton and say, that's a good place for a bar. So, and again, you can download these reports. You can make PDFs, etc., and you can share this with other people. Finally, for Zoom Prospector, there's some mapping that you can do, and I just zoomed out to the whole state to show you that this is a map of an environmental layer called wetlands. So if you had a question, is this property near a wetland? You could zoom into the property, turn on the wetlands layer under the map layers, and it would show you the wetlands. That is not a layer that we create, that comes with the system. And again, there are many different layers, and you can turn them on and off to explore what might be going on in an area around a building or a site or an address. The last piece of Zoom Prospector is the community comparisons piece. This works very differently from the others. 2 areas can be compared, and the nice thing about it is even though this is technically a Maryland-only tool, for the community comparisons, you can compare anywhere in the United States. So I compared Odenton to Newark, Ohio, because Newark, Ohio just happens to be more or less the same size. It's a little bit bigger than Odenton. And I won't even go through all of these. There's so many. A lot of this again is different. A lot of this is straight up census data. It's not the data that's used in the other parts of the system. So it does work a little bit differently. But you can look up ethnicity, race, sex, age distribution, total number of households, median household income, just lots of basic census data points on demographics, labor force, consumer expenditures, and again, straight up census data. So it's very useful if you wanted to understand, like, if you are a business and you wanted to decide if you wanted to locate it either in Odenton or in Newark, Ohio, you might want to know the differences. Or if you were in Odenton and you wanted to attract a business that was in Newark, Ohio, you'd want to tell them how Odenton is better. And this would help you do that. So the strengths of the review of Zoom Prospector. Strengths, it's relatively easy to use. Contains a lot of standardized data to compare. It's designed to do comparisons. Every geography has the same types of data in it. Unlike public data sets where there can be lots of suppression because public data sets are required to protect confidentiality, there's no confidentiality protection in private data sets. So it allows you to look at small areas and compare them to other small areas. And it uses industry standard data sources. So if you are reporting data out of Zoom Prospector for use of, making some sort of business decision, it is the same data from companies like MC, EMSI, which is now Lightcast, which is one of the standard data sources for demographic and business data. Reference USA Gov, which is one of the standard sources for individual business data, etc. The weaknesses is because the data is from private sources, the only way that it gets to be standardized on these small geographies, so you can look specifically at all that data for Odenton on a fine scale, is that it is modeled. So it's not real data. They run it through a computer program. They apportion it, they dice it and slice it to make it fit all of the different geographies that they're using within this system. So that's why it's not 100% correct, and that's why it's not 100% comparable to public official data. And this system is really best for area analysis for marketing or locating a business. If somebody said, I want you to give me the rundown on Odenton with official census statistics, I wouldn't use Zoom Prospector. If somebody said, I want to know where the best place is to locate my pizza joint, I would use Zoom Prospector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and jump out of the presentation real quick. And I'm going to see if I can actually get into the system. And I assume you can see this. Yeah, okay. So again, Duck Creek Business Campus is right here. So let's look at it. I just clicked on it. So here's Duck Creek Business Campus. Yeah, that's odd. We're not going to look at that. That's a mistake because that says it's in Smyrna, Delaware. That's our new data provider. Putting the wrong data in. We'll look at Howard County Executive Center. That's better. So this is in Howard County. It's officially in Ellicott City. Let's see what they have for pictures. It looks like they only have two. Yeah. There can be more than two pictures, but it's really up to the broker or the system how many pictures get put in. You can see we have $22.50 per square foot, full service. Got the property details. Again, we can get directions. We can automatically from here click and get the city or the county profile. Here's your availability. It's for lease. There's multiple units for lease. So this property record has mixed multiple listings within one. The total building size, the class. David Fritz at KLNB is the contact, and there's his email. Or you can contact Charles. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but again, he's at KNB. And Alex is our State of Maryland Economic Development contact. Or if you want to talk to, again, we have to update that because Larry retired, but Larry or Howard County ED contact. So there's multiple contacts. You can generate a PDF. So you will want to put in, you can see that some of these need to be selected. We'll say that we want to select all of them. Call it Executive Center. We'll create it. Sometimes this is really quick. Sometimes it isn't. Okay, that was very quick. Okay, and now we have a PDF that we can share with people. So hold on, because the bar is blocking. There we go. Okay. Now we're done with that. Now we want to see if Howard County Executive Center 1 is a place we want to be. So let's see if we care about, say, the labor force in the area. So again, we can click on the labor force tool. It automatically defaults to a 10-mile radius, and we'll use that because it's quicker. It takes about 30 seconds to generate the drive time by minute because it's, again, doing an analysis of the road network. So we'll just stick with the 10-mile circle. And because that's a circle, if we wanted to do 5, we could go to 5, see if it was that quick. We can look at the employees, and within a 5-mile radius of that building, there's 54,217 total employees. And it has the employees by occupation. Again, let's say we were an architect and we wanted to open an architecture office. Are there architects in our area? Maybe. Let's zoom out a little bit. Oh, yeah, there are. They're not exactly in our area, but they're pretty close. Within 5 miles, actually, certainly within 10 miles. So that tells us that the labor force that we might be interested in, this is not a bad place to start grabbing them up because they work in the area. Wanted to see the number of businesses. There's 6,975 businesses. And you can see it automatically defaulted to by the number of employees. But again, we were looking for architecture. You can see there's so many different choices that you can do. So architecture might actually be too specific because it's a service. Let's zoom down real quick. No, that's agricultural engineering. It's probably hidden under other professional, scientific, and technical services. So, but we get the idea that we can see these different things. So we can also look at occupation data. There's different tools, but they do similar things. The median wage of management occupations within a 10-mile radius is $155,000. Architecture and engineering occupations, the median wage is $93,000 within this area. If we change the radius to say 50 miles, we should see changes in the dollar amounts, and we do. Slight changes because it's still the same basic geographic area. If you're interested in opening up a business, you may want to know what the consumer expenditures are within an area for a certain type of consumer. So if you wanted to, and again, I had mentioned before, a pizza shop, that will be food away from home. course, if you have a restaurant, you're in competition with everybody else doing food away from home. But within a 10-mile radius of this property, the average household is spending $5,269 on food away from home, or in total, $1,580,054 is being spent within this circle on food away from home. So you're trying to capture some of that. And here we see just a map of the concentration of that. And Ellicott City being a place of relatively high income, there's a lot of spending on food away from home right there. So, this I could go through all of these. I won't, because we don't have all day. But you can see how, depending on what you're researching, there's just a lot of information here. And again, you can download a PDF report, or you can come over here and you can download the map. You can also make the map larger if you need to, if you wanted to go full screen. And just see what's going on in a much larger area. You can hit that full screen button and get a whole map of the entire area. And again, you could do a screen capture on this, and then you could put it in a report or do whatever you need to do with your map. So I won't spend too much more time on this. I'm going to skip over to the Explore Communities. It's very similar because it's the same tools and it's the same data. It's just being used slightly differently. So let's see, we're going to do a location, and again, let's do Odenton. So it's come up with the map, and here, it says view details. It gives you this little property card, but that, of course, it doesn't tell us much. So here's those infographics. 43,566 people. There's a slider here so you can see the change over time. And 47% male, 52% female. Median age is 35. Here's our population growth since 2014. Here's our educational attainment. So you can see there's lots of people with bachelor's degrees, lots of people with graduate degrees in the area. Very few people that only have high school or less than high school. Although there's no colleges directly in Odenton, there's 69 within 50 miles that give an associate's degree or certificate, and 98 universities within 50 miles that give a bachelor's degree or higher. Because as we know, there's lots of colleges and universities in this area. Labor force, it tells you how it breaks down. The blue collar, white collar shift, most of it's white collar in the area. Total number of establishments in Odenton. Most of them, of course, like anywhere, most of them being 1 to 4 employees. Income and spending, it's a high income area. So most households are making over $100,000. Breakdown on how they spend their money, whether they own or they rent, how they get to work, lots of information. So that's just your community overview. And again, if you wanted to look at, let's go to the businesses within Odenton, because again, it works a little bit differently. What we're seeing right here is a dot that represents every business. So if I hover over that dot, click on it, that's EM Design and Consulting. That's Sales Technology Solutions. And that's L.R. Wilson and Sons Incorporated. Now, again, this information is coming from Reference USA Gov. You'll have to double check it for reality. Sometimes information makes it that it's not correct. Sometimes they don't update when a business goes out of business quick enough. And sometimes they miss new businesses. So there can be a little time lag for businesses dropping out because they don't exist anymore and businesses coming online. But generally, it's a pretty good list. So again, we had talked about, let's look at, let's say, banking, finance, and insurance. I want to open my own bank. So commercial bank, there's 13 in the area. And what I've just done by clicking on the commercial banks, so many of them are ATMs, is zoomed in only on those. So you can see all the other dots dropped out. And I'm only looking at banks. So if I go back, I can do something similar. Yeah, I went back too far. Or I can turn off. We'll wait for the dots to show up. Maybe they're not going to. turn off all the dots, and I can only turn on the ones that I want to look at. So now I'm only looking at accommodation and food services. I can turn those off. Now I'm only looking at administrative and support and waste management, remediation services, arts, sports, entertainment and recreation, etc. So, and I can also filter these. I say I cared only about big businesses, businesses that employed 50 people or more. You can see that I automatically just cut out a lot of them. I don't know why it zoomed like that. That could have been me. So now there's only 4 of them, and that's where the 4 are and who they are. And if I wanted to open this up, there's 4 full-service restaurants that employ more than 50 people in Odenton. So yeah, it's a useful tool for doing this sorts of analysis as well on the community level. Finally, I'll look at the compare communities real quick. This is actually a lot of information, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Again, let's say I wanted to look at Odenton. I think for the initial comparison, because of the license for this data, at least one of the compared communities has to be in Maryland. You can't use this to compare 2 different communities that are both outside of Maryland. And we can compare it to Ellicott City. I spelled that wrong. As you can see right in here, it's showing me all sorts of places for my second comparison. And now that I have run 2, and I can do more than 2 too, I can run my report. And here again, it's infographics. We have the graphic, and we have the numeric of 43,556 population versus 77,362 population. But as I said, that might not be the official data. So if you wanted the official data, you could come over to the census. So here's what the census says for the most recent data available. The census says that Odenton has 41,846, and the data source is the American Community Survey for 2019. And Ellicott City has 72,665. And that, as I said, is the difference between the official statistics, only counting the people that are within the boundary, versus the GIS online system that is pulling data from smaller pieces that are called block groups and adding them up to approximate an area. That's why Zoom Prospector is not the best tool for getting official data, unless you only go into the compare communities section and look at the census data. But with the census data, you can see there's an amazing amount of census data because the census collects an amazing amount of data. So you can see gross rent paid. The most likely rent paid in both of these places is about the same. It's between $1,500 and $1,999. So again, you could spend all day here, but if you wanted some very specific data on an area that comes from the census, this is an easy way to do it instead of going to the Census Bureau, because the Census Bureau system can be more complicated. So this was mostly what I wanted to talk about. I figure I'll stop here and take some questions in case anybody wants to drop off. And then I'm going to show you, just by going through the slides, a few other systems that you might want to explore that are not as comprehensive as Zoom Prospector, but have some interesting information that you'd be interested in. So does anybody have any questions right now on Zoom Prospector that you want me to answer? Or do you want me to just roll through the other 3 or 4 systems really quickly?
So, Jim, I have a quick question, and I think you covered it just briefly. So if you own a property and it is not listed in Zoom Prospector, how does one go about getting it added to the database?
Well, right now there's only 2 ways. If it's literally just one property and you want to put it in, you can send it directly to us. As you can, if we get back to the front here, at the bottom, here, you can see that there's a contact here, Gary Ventry, if people know Gary. Gary is sort of the official contact for the system. You can send it to him, or you could send it to me, and we can enter it. We have the ability to directly enter properties. If you have more than one property, if you're a broker and you have a few properties and you generally rep properties and you want to get them into the system, it is possible to get your own individual login to do properties. We're moving away from that though, because with Resimplify, if somebody enters, if either we enter a property or if a broker enters a property, that means that it's not covered by Resimplify and it's not being automatically updated by our new subscription service. So we're working on creating a third system, which is where you would give the property directly to Resimplify. They would put it on their list and then they would add it to their tracking, and they would also be responsible for keeping it updated. So we haven't quite figured that part out yet. So right now, send it to me, send it to Gary, whose email is here. Or like I said, if you have a few different properties and you want to get into this system, we can talk about getting you your own login. There's about 5 or 6 brokers that have logins. There's not too many, but a few do it on their own.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions before Jim continues?
Okay. If not, I'll just roll through these other ones. It's only a few, and it's not as in-depth. I thought I was remiss in talking about our system without talking about the Census Bureau's own system, which is relatively new. It's been around for a few years, but it gets better every year. And that is Census Business Builder. And you can see it down here again. I put the web link. Census Business Builder allows you to go into this online system, which again is map-based. So it's similar to how Zoom Prospector works. You have toolbars that allow you to zoom in on metros, counties, cities, and towns, etc., and pull out official statistics on those areas. And then generate reports, similar to the reports you generate out of Zoom Prospector. And again, I won't. And again, this was a specific report I did for zip code 21723. So you can get down to the zip code, which can be useful depending on what you're researching. The strengths of the Census Business Builder is that it is official government data, mostly from the Census Bureau, but also from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So if you know that you're looking for the official data for whatever reason, sometimes you do a grant proposal, sometimes you just want to have, say it comes from the Census Bureau. You know, you want to have the weight of the official statistic. Census Business Builder is good. The weakness is that the official government data can be suppressed because there are rules about confidentiality. So when you get to small areas, you might not be able to get the data that you want to get because they don't report it on that small of an area. And because it's official data, it's only what the data that the government officially collects for that area. So you may find if you use the Census Business Builder, not all the data you want is available for the area you're researching. But again, if you want those official statistics, Census Business Builder is a similar process to use than Zoom Prospector. Quickly, another census tool, and this is a very specific tool, but if you need it, you need it. It's called On the Map. And it's called, what it is doing is analyzing the work and home location of employed people to show commuting patterns. So again, in Odenton, this is showing Baltimore. All right, we'll use the example of Baltimore. You know, we know that a certain amount of people work in Baltimore. We know that a certain amount of people live in Baltimore. How many people work and live in Baltimore? It's surprisingly not as many as you would think. So every day when this was pulled, and this is an older slide on recycling, so I think this is a few years ago now, but you know, this data doesn't change that much. 217,000 people in this year, I think it was 2015, were commuting into Baltimore to work. 123,000 people were leaving Baltimore to work, and only 108,000 people were both living and working in Baltimore at the time. This data, and although it's very limited because honestly it doesn't tell you much more than that, is a little bit of information on what they do for a living, like very generically, the 2-digit NAICS code, like, you know, do they work in manufacturing or do they work in services? or real general information about what they make for a living. So if you're not interested in the pull of people coming into an area or how many people are leaving an area to work, this tool is probably not for you, but this can be really useful to understand the dynamics of the workforce in your area. And you may go to an area and you may find out that there's a lot of people who live in this area, but it's a residential community. So they're all commuting out, they're all leaving to go work somewhere else. And you might say to yourself, this would be a great place to put my business because I could hire people and they wouldn't have to drive 2 hours to go to work, or 45 minutes or whatever. They could work right here. So that's what this tool is for. So if you want to understand commuting patterns, use On the Map. It's pretty much the only tool that exists that lets you do that. And I said the strengths, and it's also official government data. It's easy to use. You just type in your area and you click and analyze, and it spits out an analysis. Its weakness is that's pretty much all it does. Another weakness is that because of suppression, because the Pentagon and the FBI didn't want their people in this system, they're not. So military and what they call security related, which is mostly the FBI, are skipped. So if you live around a military base, you're not going to get the correct information because they're not in the system. Very quickly, Claritas, if people are familiar with that, market segmentation. It's just a little bit fun, I think, to type in a zip code and see like zip code 21202, which is where I work, downtown Baltimore, has aspiring A-listers, an urban modern mix, cosmopolitans, and connected bohemians. What those things mean, it's totally made up by Claritas. But again, if you click on them, it brings you through to the description of what they are. And, this is how marketers see your area. When they want to say, okay, I want to put my store in your area, I click through to aspiring A-listers, and they're very, very likely to eat out at quick service restaurants. So if I want to open up a quick service restaurant in an urban area, I want to be surrounded by aspiring A-listers. So it's just another, again, it's another tool. The free tool is limited, but I think it's somewhat useful. Obviously, they want you to subscribe to their very expensive market segmentation data. And I think this is probably the last one, Reference USA Gov, which you can go through directly. So all that business data that I was looking at using Zoom Prospector, you can get at directly using Reference USA Gov and get more of it. It's very limited what you can pull out of directly out of Zoom Prospector. So if you want to dig deeper into the businesses in an area, you can either have a subscription like we do, or you can go to the local library. Your library system may or may not have it, but Enoch Pratt Library does have it, and everybody in the state can get an Enoch Pratt library card. So if you have an Enoch Pratt library card, you can use it to log into the reference systems at Enoch Pratt Free Library, and you can search Reference USA Gov for specific businesses by name or by geographies like towns. And finally, this is a plug for Maryland Workforce Exchange. They are run by the Department of Labor. It's actually really similar to our system. They actually use similar data. It's not quite as flexible in how you can do the analysis, but where it's useful, I think, is that if you want to know updated unemployment statistics. Like right now, our unemployment statistics are really low. So if you just want to track stuff like that for the geographic area that you're in, Maryland Workforce Exchange is good. And it has similar information than what we have. So another private data set that the Department of Labor contracts to a private company for, and they populate it with similar data, but I think Zoom Prospector is more flexible. So yeah, and that's about it. So there's lots of systems out there for people to use. A lot of them share the same data. It's more how you get to access the data and how easy they are to use. I think some of these are the easiest. So again, any questions? I know it's a lot.
While our guests are thinking of questions, I just want to say this is so impressive and there's so much information in one place. I had no idea. Like I knew you could search maybe for space, office space, and various things, but This could just be used for so many different things, like you said, marketing, understanding workforce, and things like that. I'm really excited about this. We'll make
Yes,
sure to share it with the rest of our membership as well.
it's a cool system. Surprising how much you can do with it.
Yeah. Any questions from our guests? Everyone is quiet. Well,
Overloaded a little bit.
well, after the program, we will follow up with all of the registered guests by email and share Jim's contact information. And I think you mentioned you'll be sending the slides over to us as well.
Yep.
So we'll go ahead and send that to all of our guests. We also recorded this seminar, which will go up on our website, but we'll share that link with everyone as well. So if they have any follow-up questions, we can definitely get in touch with you on that. Last chance for questions. No? Okay. Well, I just want to thank you, Jim. This was, like I said, so informative. I learned so much and look forward to using this tool in our organization as well. And yeah, thank you to all our guests for attending also. And again, we'll follow up with you a little later today with the slides and the link to the video. So thank you again, Jim. It was great to meet you and work with you on this.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you as well.
All right, everybody. Have a great day.
You too.